It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in our Fanzine Friday series. Today we round out this fanzine with a look at Black Rider number 4. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer, and this is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, I take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. Today, that's Black Rider number 4 from the UK in 1981. Hope you enjoy the video. So as I mentioned, we're taking a look today at Black Rider number 4. For the last month, we've been taking a look at this fantastic fanzine from the United Kingdom called Black Rider. And today, unfortunately, we're here with the last issue of that fanzine that they put out. This was put together in the early 80s. And Gavin Carver is the editor, and he's got a crew of 5 or 6 dedicated people who work with him on every issue of this fanzine. Lots of great Dungeons and Dragons content. Let's start off today, take a closer look at this cover. Today's cover is provided by Ian McCaig, whose art has not appeared in any of the prior fanzines. I really like this illustration. It's pretty well done. You've got these dragons flying around. There's a little nest of dragon eggs, and this woman is sitting there watching them all hatch. The editorial is pretty brief. He just mentions a local games day that was going on that has moved up to being a 2-day event and how much fun that was, and telling people to continue to send in contributions and information about what they'd like to see in the fanzine. Let's take a look at the table of contents. He provides one. I've typed it here just to make it a little easier to read. Got the editorial and table of contents. There's an article on what they're calling silent elves, which is a new race or sub-race for the Dungeons & Dragons game. Small World, which is a review of miniatures. Battle of Arrakis, which is a brand new game completely contained within this fanzine, set in the world or the sci-fi world of Dune. So it's a pretty good game. It's a board game, war game type of rules. Artifacts, which are new magic items. Potluck, which are some random rules. Odds and ends, some commentary on running your D&D campaign. The D&D adventure this time is called Mountain of the Lost Orb. Then there's a new class, I think it would be called, for the Traveler sci-fi campaign called the Curl. I don't know, probably mispronouncing that. A plan for village use, which is sort of like a completely designed village for your D&D campaign. Could even be a setting for an interesting little session. There's some detail in there you could use to run a little evening session, I think, without anything else really, so it's pretty well done. And then some tips on playing your character, on role-playing effectively. The contributors this time, we have Gavin Carver, Jonathan Dick, Tim Lyons, Craig Callaghan, Ian McCaig. As I said, his art is on the cover only, and then you've got Sean Harris and Richard Wickes who provide additional art throughout the fanzine. And finally, Jonathon Surgeson, who provides the drawing for the Dune board game that's inside of here. So the first thing we have are the silent elves. And so I don't track this. They say there are 3 types of elves. They don't mention the first one, and then they go right into telling you the second type are the surface race of elves that we're familiar with, such as high elves or gray elves. All descend from the second branch of that tree, and the third branch of that tree are what they call the silent elves, and this is kind of interesting. So the silent elves are a group of elves that chose to move into the, we would call it today, the Underdark, into the caverns beneath the surface world. Say they didn't lose their love of the flora and fauna of the surface, and so they've carved beautiful things that resemble trees or flowers and set those with gems and jewels to remind them of what life was like on the surface world. They don't say exactly what the background was that caused this group to want to move to the subterranean realm, but that's what they did. And as you might imagine, their skin has darkened, and their hair is jet black but turns silver as they age. They've got some characteristics here, some modifiers for their stat block, and then they say they also have developed their own character class, essentially, called the Changer. And this is an interesting topic, so I thought I'd share it with you. So the Changer sort of reminds me of the Bard from AD&D, first edition AD&D rules. So they start off as fighters. They have to get to 8th level, somewhere between 8th and 12th level fighter. They elect to change to thief. And then they do the thief until they're somewhere between 9th and 13th level of ability. And it's not clear to me if they go back to first level in their mind to get to 9th, or their thinking is, well, I'm an 8th level fighter, I do 1 level of thieving, I become a 9th level thief. That's not clear to me. But anyway, what it says is between 9th and 13th level as a thief, they switch to learning druid skills. And once they start their druid career, they become a changer instead of a pure druid. At least that's how I'm interpreting this. And so the first level, they don't get hit dice, and after that they start getting additional D8 hit dice all the way up through 11th level, so they can get 10 additional D8s of hit points. And they have different titles from being a druid, and they have druid spells that seem to be the same as their druid level of druid spells. But then they also gain some additional abilities that are druid-like, speaking with animals, drawing in animals, animal summoning. And then as they reach these higher levels, they can actually transform into a particular type of animal. And so giant eagle, wolf, bear, saber-toothed cat, I believe, and then any sort of humanoid shape, and then any living shape, so that would include, anything that's alive like a tree. They can take that form as well. I think these special abilities here, as I would read it, are designed to take the place of their druid special abilities, and so I don't think they get both. But anyway, that's the new race/class, both of which are kind of interesting. Probably a little overpowered in my view, but nonetheless could be something fun to play. And again, I think particularly interesting, I'd have to go back and double check whether I think the author had connection to the drow that Gary Gygax created, in the G series and D series modules, or if this is just happens to be a similar idea on a parallel timeline. Model review, short and sweet today. They just mentioned that TSR now has an official AD&D range. I'm pretty sure this is a reference to the Grenadier series that was released at this time period, right? Because I'm pretty sure this fanzine's not dated. I'm pretty sure it's from 1981, and I think this is the Grenadier line of Dungeons and Dragons miniatures that were released. In particular, because he talks about the Balrog, and he says he looks a little bit huggable, which I think is a fair characterization of the Balrog that came out from Grenadier at that time period. He does say, they're a little friendlier and chunkier than some other ranges like Ralpartha, for example, and also that they come in blister packs of several. I think he says they come in packs of 6, and so you might not want that many, and so that might cause you to go to some other ones, such as the Ralpartha range. Artifacts. Artifacts, of course, are magical items. We have the Cup of Crimson Wonder, a red chalice. And if you defeat someone and put a drop of blood in there, then you can drink it. I'm assuming you have to drink it. You gain the knowledge of the victim. And for some reason it says if questioned by a monk will divulge its secrets. So that's not entirely clear. I guess maybe your vanquished foe is not dead. In our campaign, the vanquished foes typically were dead, so maybe that's the difference. He says if you put the blood of an opposite aligned creature in the same day, of 2 creatures in the same day, the cup will reject that. I guess it doesn't like it, and a bunch of blood will come gushing out. And it also says if you put the holy water and blood from a lawful good creature together, you'll get a Degenie appear. So I'm not sure why that is the case. And then the other thing is and so it says nota bene at the bottom, blood must be of a freshly killed foe. So there we go. I'm not sure what the questioning is of a monk in that. So again, these things aren't always fully edited and vetted before they show up, and that's some of the charm of the fanzines. It's sort of like what we would have done in our home campaign as kids. The second artifact today is called the Crown of Truth, and if it's put upon your head, you must tell the truth. If you don't, you get an electric shock. and the hit point damage you take is based on the extent or seriousness of the lie that you told. And then if you try to steal the jewels out of this, you will become a slave to the crown, so I guess it's somewhat sentient. All right. Potluck. Random rules. Just add a little realism or add a chart for your game, right? Today's special one is rules for swimming across a river. Perhaps a rule you didn't know you need, but now, fortunately, thanks to the Black Rider number 4, you have. And they give some abilities based on your race and some bonuses or other modifiers based on strength, armor, that type of thing. And they say here, if you get in the water with metal armor, there's no chance of swimming across the river, you just sink. So I like that rule at least. Okay, odds and ends contains a couple of pieces of information you probably didn't know that you needed to know. The first one is a discussion about vampires, and apparently the author had been watching a movie where vampires were sickly and thin and pale, and he says that's not, I guess, realistic, because if you were feeding on blood all the time, you'd probably be kind of bloated and you'd have more of a pinkish hue to your skin. So for those of you who'd like to inject that realism into your vampires, there's some feedback. And the other thing was, I guess, an attempt to understand where the idea of werewolves had come from. And he's deduced that he thinks it was Vikings that had invaded England who would wear skin, so maybe like a wolf skin, including maybe the head up over top of their hair, or a bear or whatever, gave rise to these tales of these wild men who were half animal, half man. So that's his theory. Then we have our Dungeons and Dragons adventure, Mountain of the Lost Orb. No offense to Craig Callaghan, but this one's not great compared to some of the others that we've seen. Reminds me of the kind of thing we might have done really early on when we were young kids. It says it's for 4 to 6 people, levels 5 to 8. Some of the encounters are way too hard for that, in my view. The rewards are way too good. Like average soldiers in here might have enchanted weapons, so you're going to be leaving here with like a stack of +2, +3 swords, magic armor, and shields, as much as you can carry. You get to the final encounter, and you put if you found the lost orb, and you take it to the matching throne that it goes with, that character is going to have crazy magical powers he can use. There are allegedly billions of gold pieces in this room. It's just a little, I don't know if you want to call it Monty Hall or not, but I mean, just sort of over the top. That having been said, I think if you tuned it a little, the structure is actually pretty good. You've got, you go in search of this lost city, presumptively you find it, or you're done pretty quickly, and you'd venture around, and there are sort of intelligent ecology here where there's, there are nobles who live in this city, there are guards. You've got to kind of avoid them or figure out a way to make peace with them so you don't get thrown in the jail or end up in the gladiator pit that's part of this little tiny town. So with some good dungeon master work to tune back all the magic items, tune down some of the monsters that are way too powerful, it could be, I think there's, the bones are there for a good adventure. It probably takes you a long session or a couple of sessions to play through this adventure. Here's the map and the other map that shows you sort of this underground area laid out. And like I said, it's kind of interesting. It's got this circle that goes around the main hallway, and you can go past things. Again, a little overtuned. There's stuff in here that gives you permanent stat bonuses, of +1, +2 on different stats and things like that. So I'm not really in favor of that one. Okay. So this is the Traveler character class, which I don't really talk about Traveler on these videos, but because of the drawing of what this creature, the Corul or whatever, how you say it, sort of looks like a mind flayer, and I thought that was kind of cool. I'm sure that's what inspired it. And then we've got this DM's Aid, which is discussion of a village, and it's not so much tips on how to create a village as it's a specific village. And like I said, this one is actually, I think, has the basis for a pretty good scenario. It's, and we'll mention here in just a second, just sort of missing the last piece. So we've got this village. They're two different religious factions. They're both dependent on the water from this well in the center, which they tell you actually has some addictive properties to it, so no one will leave. And, you know, they share use of the water from the well, but they don't like each other, and there's, you know, balance of power, or they would gladly wipe the other one out completely. And so it's what it's missing is just, and then what, right? So like, what's the adventure thread when the characters show up? They probably need a little dungeon master guidance to say, here's to pick one of the factions, or something you can do that resolves the tension in this village. But the village itself has got really good bones. Here's the village, and the one religious faction essentially lives to the northern part, and the other faction is down here to the south. And he goes through, he takes that map and divides it up into 8 pie pieces and gives you some of what's there, the key people, the key buildings, and he's like, you know, and then maybe others are just houses, and, you know, he says, so you have to flesh that stuff out. But it's sort of, again, very good bones to make an interesting town rather than just a generic town you pass through and it's got the 7 typical buildings and you just keep moving, right? So there's something going on here that your characters could at least stop and enjoy sort of a side adventure. Would take a little bit of effort from the dungeon master to flesh out exactly how that rolls out, but it could be pretty good. And then last, we've got some tips here on playing your character. I should say the village is done by Lyons, Tim Lyons, so I thought kudos to him. This one's pretty well done. And then these tips come to us from Richard Wickes or Wickes. All right, so he's playing your character. He says, now Gary Gygax says you could play 2 or more characters, and essentially his article is he really doesn't like that because inevitably some number of those become essentially glorified NPCs, cannon fodder, etc., as you pick one that you favor and then just use the rest of them to help that one character out. And he says the best part of the game is role-playing. And when you have 5 characters, it's, for example, he says, it's really hard to role-play 5 different characters realistically, so you really need to stick to one. And then when it comes to role-playing, he's got some tips. These are great tips, universal, timeless. If your character's a fighter, give that person a battle cry. Have a chosen weapon. Name your weapon, right? Some things to give you a little bit more depth to your character. Now this one's horrible. Magic users use their high IQ in combat. I agree. Well, just in general. I don't know why more of them don't sneak around and try and backstab people. That's a horrible idea. For first off, they don't have the backstab bonus. They don't have the backstab double damage. And if the magic user gets anywhere close to melee combat, he or she's going to get chopped up, especially at low level, right? That's how magic users are designed. So in contrast, I would say buy yourself some good missile weapons. Hopefully you have a slightly high dexterity, get a slight bonus, and throw darts, throw daggers, use a sling, something from a distance, and stay out of combat if you're a magic user, at low level in particular. Thieves, don't steal from the party, which is a great tip. And you'll recall we were talking about the articles bemoaning the fact that thief characters kept stealing from party members and ending up killed or kicked out. And it is a horrible idea. And that's the player's fault, not the character's fault, really, right? You shouldn't play your thief that way. Because I thought about this later. Like, a thief's no more going to steal from every single person he or she sees than a fighter's going to attack every person they see, right? Or a cleric's going to bless or try to convert every player they see. So, add useless items, sure, a little bit more depth to the character, something that maybe that character really likes that doesn't have any particular advantage in the game. Add bravery. He's got a chart for bravery or cowardice, and it shows you how afraid or brave your character will be. Will they run away from everything? Will they stand in the face of invincible odds, or somewhere in between? I don't think you need a chart for that, but I think it's a good trait to know about your character. Think about your family, think about your social class. They mentioned in the prior fanzine issue they had something for social class. And then he says for clerics, speaking of conversion, your cleric should actually be out there trying to convert people on a fairly regular basis. And he also puts in a nice plug for the Deities and Demigods book that's come out. So that brings us to the end of Black Rider number 4. That brings us to the end of this series of fanzines. And I should mention, this is the regular size slick paper cover, not heavy stuck cover, folded in half, 40-some pages long. So I hope you're enjoying the series. These are a lot of fun to do, and I've got something picked out for where we're going next, so I'll share that with you guys in the week to come. Hope you're subscribed. Tell your friends to give us a look, and hopefully they'll become subscribers as well. And until next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.